I mean, he's still standing there behind that lectern saying, stop the boats. I can't help but noting that he's got nowhere near stopping the boats. Just your thoughts on this new legislation, this strange idea. He doesn't want to leave the ECHR, but he wants to introduce legislation that will allow him to circumnavigate the ECHR. It all seems extremely circuitous and desperate. Do you think that he will ever stop the boats, and do you think that his plan B about Rwanda has a chance in snowball's hell of working?
The treaty he's concluded, the government's concluded with Rwanda, might work. After all, the Supreme Court, when it did its ruling a few weeks ago, made clear that its finding was a basis of fact, that Rwanda was not a safe country to which people could be sent. It left open a possibility that it was lawful to do this, and indeed it didn't suggest it was unlawful if Rwanda was safe. The difficulty the government's got is that it has now concluded a treaty which it says makes Rwanda safe, and I have to say, looking at it, it may well do so. But it then says the courts cannot consider whether Rwanda is safe or not when the administrative decisions are taken, except in highly restrictive circumstances. And as such, I'm afraid I think the policy will fail. I think he has made an considerable mistake in not allowing the courts to consider the treaty. Because the likelihood is that, firstly, the one loophole which is in the bill will be exploited to get the matter before the courts. Secondly, somebody is going to challenge the policy on the basis that it's incompatible with the ECHR and under the provisions of the Human Rights Act. So you may well get a declaration of incompatibility, as much over process over what would happen in Rwanda. And finally, I think it's most unlikely that he'll get this bill through the House of Lords, because the House of Lords will say that the bill is constitutionally very odd, because it takes away from the judiciary the question of being able to vet administrative decisions, and that is a highly unusual thing to do.
I mean, Dominic, it seems to me that this is almost like the Conservative Party's new Brexit. It's sort of really brought out of the woodwork all of those sort of age-old ideological divisions. So with people saying, we need to leave the ECHR, and others voicing disgust at even the suggestion of doing that. But I think most people watching this are thinking, this has been going on now for 2 years. We just want to see those ruddy boats stopped already. And it seems to me that even if this doesn't bound around like a ball in a ping-pong machine through various layers of courts and the House of Lords and so on and so forth, even if, against all probabilities, the plane does take off, it's still expected to be some kind of silver bullet to stop the boats, and frankly, it's not going to be.
Well, I think that may well be right, and it's impossible to tell, because even if you're sending people to Rwanda, the government's idea is that it breaks the business model of the people smugglers. But whether it does or not, in view of the numbers that will go to Rwanda, which are actually going to be quite small, I have no idea. That's a policy decision. But the government's problem is it now has a significant minority within the Conservative Party who seem intent on breaching our international legal obligations and don't seem to care less about what the consequences of that will be. And the consequences of that will be very considerable. It's unlawful. It's a breach of the ministerial code if they were to do this. So the civil service would almost certainly not cooperate. You do better to withdraw from those international treaties if that's what you want to do, but you have to give notice that you're going to do it. You can't carry out this sort of shortcut that Mr. Jenrick and Suella Braverman seem to believe is feasible. It just won't work. So they are completely and totally wrong about this.
Well, you say that, but actually Emmanuel Macron's pretty much doing exactly the same thing in France right now, with Marine Le Pen breathing down his neck. He's basically turned around and said, we're going to start ignoring the ECHR.
Well, he hasn't done that yet. And I simply make the point that if you want to ignore the ECHR, you've got to withdraw from the ECHR. And in the context of the United Kingdom, that comes at very considerable practical cost. So in my view, it's a piece of fantasy politics.
Two aspects of this that confuse me. First of all, as I say, Rishi wants to stay in the ECHR. As you say, Dominic, people like Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick don't. But Rishi seems to me to want to have his cake and eat it too. I want to stay in the ECHR, but I'm going to pass legislation that will allow me to circumnavigate some of the ECHR's jurisdiction. Because the Supreme Court said that they're not entirely convinced that Rwanda is safe for our migrants, that they might be referred to their own countries, and there are question marks about gay rights there. The way that Rishi's come up to get round that is to get MPs to vote that Rwanda is safe. Well, you know, you might as well vote that the moon's made of cheese. It's ridiculous.
You're